Hollywood just burned billions of dollars in 2025, and nobody is talking about the real reasons why. Studios greenlit projects that audiences never asked for, sequels nobody wanted, and remakes that felt like creative bankruptcy. What happens when a $100 million budget meets empty theater seats? You get the most spectacular financial disasters of the year. Here are the 10 biggest box office flops of 2025 that prove sometimes money cannot buy audience love. Number 10. Sinners. Should 2025. Ryan Coogler teaming up with Michael B. Jordan again sounded like a guaranteed win on paper. After all, these two gave us Creed and Black Panther. But Sinners proved that even the most beloved creative partnerships can stumble when the marketing machine fails to show up. This Southern Gothic horror thriller dropped into theaters with barely a whisper from Warner Brothers, leaving audiences confused about what kind of movie they were even supposed to be watching. The film follows twin brothers in the 1930s South who return home to start a juke joint, only to encounter supernatural forces tied to America's dark history of racial violence. Critics actually loved it, praising Coogler's ambitious blend of horror and historical commentary. The problem was getting people through the doors in the first place. Warner Brothers seemed to have zero faith in this project, despite its prestigious pedigree. The marketing campaign was practically invisible compared to their blockbuster tentpoles. Some industry insiders whispered that the studio simply didn't know how to sell a black horror period piece to mainstream audiences. Michael B. Jordan delivered a dual performance that deserved awards consideration, playing both brothers with completely distinct personalities and physicalities. Yet the average moviegoer had no idea this film even existed until it was already struggling. The budget sat around $80 million, but the domestic opening barely cracked $15 million. International markets showed little interest in a deeply American story rooted in specific cultural trauma. Sometimes the best films become the biggest casualties of studio indifference and marketing malpractice. Number 9. The Alto Knights, 2025. Robert De Niro playing two different mob bosses in the same movie sounds like a cinema fan's fever dream come true. The Alto Knights promised to deliver exactly that fantasy, with De Niro portraying both Frank Costello and Vito Genovese in a tale of organized crime rivalry. Director Barry Levinson brought decades of experience to the project. So what went catastrophically wrong? The answer is timing and fatigue. Audiences in 2025 showed clear signs of being absolutely exhausted by mafia content. The Godfather nostalgia well had been pumped dry by countless streaming series and wannabe mob epics. Even De Niro's legendary status could not overcome the collective shrug from moviegoers who felt like they had seen this story 100 times before. Warner Brothers spent approximately $50 million on production, betting that De Niro's star power and the dual-role gimmick would generate buzz. Critics were mixed, with some praising the technical achievement of having one actor play both rivals, while others complained the film felt like a museum piece from another era. The de-aging technology used to portray the characters in their younger years drew comparisons to The Irishman, and not always favorable ones. Some viewers found the digital manipulation distracting rather than immersive. Opening weekend brought in a dismal $8 million domestically. The film struggled to find any audience demographic, too old-fashioned for younger viewers and too familiar for older ones who had already seen De Niro play these kinds of roles dozens of times throughout his career. Number 8. Dog Man, 2025. DreamWorks Animation took a massive swing at the beloved children's book series by Dav Pilkey, the same creator behind Captain Underpants. Dog Man seemed like a guaranteed hit with built-in brand recognition from millions of young readers who devoured these graphic novels. Instead, the film became proof that not every popular book translates to box office gold. The animation style attempted to replicate Pilkey's distinctive hand-drawn aesthetic, which polarized audiences immediately. Parents on social media complained the visuals looked cheap and unfinished compared to the polished sheen of Disney and Pixar productions. Kids who loved the books felt the movie lost something essential in translation from page to screen. Universal Pictures distributed this one with high hopes, scheduling it during a competitive window that pitted it against established franchises. The estimated budget of $70 million required significant returns to justify a potential franchise. Those returns never materialized in the way executives had dreamed. Critics were gentle but unenthusiastic, describing Dog Man as perfectly adequate family entertainment that failed to distinguish itself in an overcrowded marketplace. The phrase most commonly used in reviews was "fine for kids," which is essentially a death sentence for generating adult ticket sales. Opening weekend scraped together around $20 million domestically, respectable but nowhere near the breakout numbers DreamWorks needed. The film disappeared from cultural conversation almost immediately, becoming another example of adaptation hubris, where studios assume existing fans will automatically become paying customers. Number 7. Captain America: Brave New World, 2025. Marvel fatigue became impossible to ignore when even Captain America could not fill theater seats like the old days. Brave New World introduced Anthony Mackie's Sam Wilson as the new shield-wielding hero in his first solo big-screen adventure. The Disney marketing machine roared to life, yet audiences responded with unprecedented apathy for a Marvel Cinematic Universe tentpole. The production budget reportedly ballooned past $250 million after extensive reshoots that delayed release multiple times. Behind the scenes, chaos became public knowledge, with reports of creative disagreements and studio mandates that frustrated the filmmaking team. None of this inspired confidence in the final product. Harrison Ford joined the cast as President Thaddeus Ross, taking over the role from the late William Hurt. His presence should have generated massive excitement from both Marvel fans and general audiences. Instead, even Ford's legendary charm could not overcome the perception that the MCU had lost its creative spark. Critics pointed to a muddled plot involving political intrigue that never fully committed to being either a thriller or a superhero spectacle. The action sequences felt competent but unremarkable compared to the genre-defining set pieces Marvel delivered in its prime years. Domestic opening weekend landed around $70 million, which sounds impressive until you remember this franchise once opened films above $150 million routinely. The decline in audience enthusiasm represented a crisis point for Marvel's theatrical strategy moving forward. Number 6. Paddington in Peru, 2025. Everyone loves Paddington. The marmalade-obsessed bear from darkest Peru became one of cinema's most unlikely success stories, with 2 previous films earning universal adoration and impressive box office returns. So when Paddington in Peru arrived, expectations were sky high. The reality proved that even the most beloved franchises can stumble when they venture too far from home. This third installment takes the Brown family and their furry companion on an adventure to Peru, searching for the Reverend Mother who raised Paddington at the Home for Retired Bears. The premise sounded charming enough. The execution left many longtime fans feeling somewhat disappointed. Director Dougal Wilson replaced Paul King, who had masterfully guided the first 2 films. That transition created a noticeable shift in tone and visual style that rubbed some viewers the wrong way. The magic felt slightly diminished, like a cover band playing your favorite songs competently, but without the original spark. The budget hovered around $50 million, reasonable for a family film, but requiring strong performance across multiple territories. British audiences showed up with enthusiasm, continuing their love affair with the character. American audiences proved far less interested in following Paddington across continents. Critics remained largely positive, but with qualifications, noting the film was sweet and watchable, without reaching the heights of its predecessors. The box office reflected this mild reception, performing adequately in some markets while underperforming significantly in others where the previous films had thrived. Number 5. Snow White, 2025. Disney's live-action remake machine finally encountered a project that generated more controversy than ticket sales. Snow White starred Rachel Zegler as the iconic princess and immediately became a lightning rod for culture war battles that overshadowed any conversation about the actual film itself. Zegler's comments in interviews about the original animated classic rubbed traditionalist Disney fans the wrong way. She criticized elements of the 1937 film that she found outdated, particularly regarding the prince's role in the story. These remarks went viral and sparked boycott movements before the movie even reached theaters. The production budget exceeded $200 million, putting enormous pressure on the film to perform globally. Disney doubled down on their vision despite the online backlash, clearly hoping the controversy would fade once audiences experienced the reimagined story. Gal Gadot portrayed the evil queen with scenery-chewing enthusiasm that critics praised as the film's highlight. The visual effects creating the Seven Dwarfs through CGI technology drew mixed reactions, with some finding the approach respectful and others missing the handcrafted charm of animation. Opening weekend domestic numbers fell drastically short of Disney's projections, landing around $40 million when they needed closer to $100 million to justify the investment. International markets showed similar reluctance, particularly in regions where the culture war discourse had spread through social media. The film became a case study in how off-screen controversy can poison audience reception regardless of the actual quality on screen. Number 4. Materialists, 2025. Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans, starring in a romantic comedy from acclaimed director Celine Song, sounded like exactly the kind of adult-oriented counter-programming Hollywood claims audiences want. Materialists arrived with art house credibility and genuine movie star appeal. The box office responded with crushing indifference that proved theatrical romantic comedies remain a tough sell regardless of pedigree. Song's previous film, Past Lives, earned massive critical acclaim and awards recognition, establishing her as one of the most exciting new voices in American cinema. Materialists represented a bigger budget follow-up with more commercial ambitions. Those ambitions collided with audience viewing habits that have shifted romantic comedies almost entirely to streaming platforms. The film explores a high-end matchmaker in New York City navigating her own complicated love life while engineering relationships for wealthy clients. Critics praised the sophisticated dialogue and nuanced performances from the two leads. The premise simply failed to generate the must-see theatrical urgency needed to survive in modern multiplexes. Johnson brought her understated charm while Evans demonstrated range beyond his superhero persona. Their chemistry registered as pleasant without igniting the passionate audience response studios dream about. Reviews described the film as intelligent and mature, adjectives that apparently translate to wait for streaming in contemporary movie-going calculus. The budget remained modest by studio standards at around $30 million, but even that proved difficult to recoup when opening weekend delivered barely $6 million domestically. Materialists became another cautionary tale about the near impossibility of launching original romantic stories in theaters. Number 3. Elio, 2025. Pixar's latest original concept, Crash, landed at the box office in spectacular fashion, continuing a troubling trend for the animation studio that once dominated family entertainment. Elio follows a young boy who becomes Earth's accidental ambassador to an intergalactic community of aliens. The premise screamed classic Pixar imagination. Audiences screamed back by staying home. The production budget approached $200 million, standard for Pixar features that require years of painstaking animation work. Disney's theatrical release strategy for Pixar films had become increasingly confused, following several pandemic-era titles that went directly to Disney+. Audiences seemed uncertain whether Elio was actually worth leaving their couches. Critics delivered mixed verdicts that felt unusually harsh for a studio known for near-universal acclaim. Common complaints centered on a protagonist that felt less developed than Pixar's best characters and a story that prioritized spectacle over emotional depth. The alien designs earned praise for creativity, while the narrative earned shrugs for predictability. Director Adrian Molina had previously co-directed Coco, one of Pixar's most beloved recent achievements. Expectations ran high that he could recapture that cultural lightning in a bottle. The final product suggested the magic was more attributable to collaborative chemistry than individual vision. Opening weekend limped to approximately $28 million domestically, a devastating result for a film that needed blockbuster numbers to justify its existence. The decline of Pixar's theatrical dominance accelerated, with Elio serving as the latest evidence that the brand no longer guarantees automatic audience enthusiasm. Number 2. The Fantastic Four. First Steps, 2025. Marvel's attempt to finally crack the Fantastic Four curse resulted in one of the year's most disappointing performances. This retro-styled reimagining set in an alternate 1960s reality featured Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Ebon Moss-Bachrach as Marvel's first family. The talent assembled was undeniable. The audience response was undeniably terrible. Director Matt Shakman brought television experience from WandaVision but struggled to capture theatrical magic on the biggest possible canvas. The stylized period setting confused casual viewers who expected the film to connect directly with ongoing MCU storylines. Instead, they got something deliberately separate and strange that alienated more people than it attracted. The production budget reportedly exceeded $270 million, making this one of the most expensive superhero films ever produced. Disney needed a massive global phenomenon to justify that investment. What they received was another nail in the coffin of superhero theatrical dominance. Galactus served as the primary antagonist, finally bringing one of Marvel's most iconic cosmic villains to the screen after decades of failed attempts. The visual representation impressed critics, while the characterization left comic book purists debating whether the adaptation honored the source material adequately. Opening weekend crashed to approximately $55 million domestically, a catastrophic result that sent shockwaves through the industry. The Fantastic Four had now failed to launch successfully across multiple studio attempts spanning decades, suggesting some properties simply resist cinematic adaptation regardless of budget or talent involved. Number 1. F1 2025. Brad Pitt racing Formula One cars with a budget reportedly exceeding $300 million should have been the ultimate summer movie experience. F1 instead became 2025's most jaw-dropping financial disaster, a cautionary tale about runaway production costs and misguided assumptions about global audience interests. Apple Studios partnered with legendary director Joseph Kosinski, fresh off Top Gun Maverick's billion-dollar success. The combination seemed bulletproof. Pitt had proven his box office durability across multiple decades. Kosinski had demonstrated mastery of vehicular action spectacle. Formula One racing had experienced a massive popularity surge thanks to the Netflix documentary series Drive to Survive. Yet all these elements combined to create what industry analysts called one of the most puzzling failures in recent memory. The film followed Pitt's character as a veteran driver returning to the sport after a devastating crash, mentoring a younger racer while confronting his own demons. Critics praised the racing sequences as genuinely thrilling technical achievements shot during actual Grand Prix weekends with cooperation from real Formula One teams. The story surrounding those sequences drew less enthusiasm, with complaints about formulaic underdog narratives and underdeveloped supporting characters. American audiences showed limited interest in a sport that remains far more popular in Europe and other international markets. Those international markets proved insufficient to rescue the film from its astronomical budget. Opening weekend delivered around 60 million globally, a number that would be respectable for most films, but represented catastrophic failure given the investment. Apple's theatrical ambitions took a massive hit, raising questions about whether streaming-first companies could successfully compete in traditional theatrical distribution without decades of studio infrastructure and relationships. Hollywood clearly learned nothing from previous years about responsible budgeting and audience research. These 10 disasters represent billions of dollars in combined losses that will reshape studio strategies for years to come. Which flop surprised you most? Did any of these films deserve better reception than they received? Drop your hottest takes in the comments, because some of you definitely disagree with these rankings. And here is the question that will haunt studio executives through sleepless nights. If audiences reject both original concepts and familiar franchises, what exactly do they want anymore? Maybe the theatrical experience itself is the real flop of 2025.